Let's have a hand for Dr. Carol Look. Carol, as many of you know, has been a major contributor to our email forum recently, and specializing in overweight and addiction in areas like that. And that's what her whole talk is going to be on today. One of the things I think is really important to recognize, and I think by now most of you know it, but I'm going to emphasize it anyway, and that is that addictions or overweight is really not the problem. It is a symptom of the problem. Mainly the problem is unresolved emotional issues for which we use addictive substances, including food, to tranquilize our otherwise anxious result from the unresolved emotional issues. So Carol's going to do a number of demonstrations up here. Going to have volunteers come up. We're going to have an active group. Why don't you give us this? I'm going to give this microphone a second, but give us a story about how you got started here, okay?
What's relevant is that I am a hypnotist, so many people would come to me. They come to hypnotists as a last resort for quit smoking and weight loss. And I had, despite my training, I had very mediocre results with weight loss, and it was very discouraging. So people would refer, and oh, do you do weight loss? And I started to back off of it, but kept getting referrals, and I just didn't know where to go. I didn't know how to be successful with it, and many hypnotists are successful with it, but I wasn't. I was having, people would come back after a couple of weeks and say it worked a little bit, and then they'd fall off and not return and not do the trances themselves. And so then I started, a number of colleagues were referring to me for quit smoking and weight loss continually, and there was one week where I did many sessions in a row, and I start my day at 7:30 in the morning, go till about 1:30, and then I have a long break and I go home for a leisurely lunch and then come back for a late afternoon. So by 1:30, I'm starving, and that's okay. It's like normal to be hungry at 1:30 if you've been working since 7:30. And I would do these tapping sessions in the morning, and I'd go home, be home at 1:30, and I wouldn't be hungry. And I didn't get it. Like, it didn't make sense physiologically. And it started to dawn on me that it was the tapping I was doing for other people coming in saying, I eat when I'm not hungry, I eat too fast, I eat out of anxiety, and I would be tapping for them, and I'd go home, and I would force myself to eat because I knew I had to because I had the afternoon, but I was bored, and I've never been bored with food in my life, so I knew something was off. So then I started practicing with it and having many, many successes with it, and then it progressed from there into all the details, all the protocols and the setup statements that you all have in the handout, and I love it. It's exciting. It is the area that people, I think, have the most discouragement in. And if you go to conferences, I go to hypnosis conferences, and there are obese hypnotists that are advertising for stress release, weight loss, and quit smoking. And it happens all the time. So I think it is the area that people, because they don't get to the bottom of it, they think it doesn't work, or they do a Band-Aid approach, or they do a diet. Diets don't work because you're not addressing the problem. Okay?
All right. Take it away.
Okay. Let's see. Just as far as definitions of substance abuse, two things to know, and many of you already work with substance abuse, so this will be repeat, but what's very important is that clients, they get into trouble with their substance, so alcohol, cocaine, food, television, whatever it is, and they swear it off, and then they start to use again, get into trouble again, swear it off, and the cycle starts. And so when you hear people saying, oh, I've decided to give up alcohol for a month, it's like, why would they be giving it up unless there was a problem? Someone either complained, a spouse had a problem, they missed a day of work, they got into trouble, and there's a continuum, of course. You can drink once a month and be alcoholic, or you have obsessive drinking every day. The other piece that's important is unpredictability. Someone will say to you, well, I didn't intend to get drunk tonight, but I went out and one triggered the next, triggered the next. That's your sign of alcoholism or any ism, any addiction. They can't control it. Their intention is to not go overboard, but they do go overboard. So that's just very important. Sort of just keep that in your mind. Now, compulsions versus obsessions. Obsessions are the thoughts, and with weight loss, with eating, people obsess about food all day long. They wake up in the morning and they think about what they're going to have to eat 3 meals. They think about it night and day, and so do alcoholics or drug addicts as well. How am I going to get the next fix is what they're really focused on. Compulsions, and you all know this, is the behavior piece. Okay? Now, compulsions, there are a couple definitions. You know, some people say when you don't know, when you can't control starting or stopping of your behavior, that means that you're compulsive. The phrase in AA, in Alcoholics Anonymous, that I think will really stick with you is they say, one is too many and a million isn't enough. And that goes for cookies. I mean, those of you with the weight issue will think about that with cookies, chocolate, whatever you're pursuing. That's what it feels like. So as Gary was saying, all the substances, and again, it does not matter what it is. It could be computer games. It could be surfing the internet. I had someone say to me, yes, I was on the internet till 3 in the morning. Well, something's obsessive or compulsive about that behavior when you have a job and need to get up and have a family and need sleep. That's not, something's off kilter. But so that's all about tranquilizing. And remember, people are looking for anesthesia, and they don't care if it's chocolate or alcohol. I mean, the need, it's the hierarchy of needs. If you're starving for food and you also haven't had oxygen for 3 minutes, and I offer you a tank of oxygen and a sandwich, you're going to throw the food on the floor because the hierarchy of needs says, give me oxygen. Well, for an addict, and whether it's food or alcohol or cocaine, give me the anesthesia, give me the drug, give me the thing to quiet my insides. And I said why diets don't work, because they're not getting to anything. So all these diet books that come out and say, well, maybe if you did the vegetable diet or the protein diet or the carbo diet, well, anybody can do that for a week or two, or even a month. Any alcoholic, actually almost any alcoholic, could probably quit for a week or two. But it doesn't address what's driving it, so you can't help but relapse. So all these people who are looking for the new best thing and the new best diet, they get discouraged over and over and over again, because there is some promise. The diet might make them feel better. They might be sticking to a lower calorie intake during the first 2 weeks, and then they inevitably backslide, because it's not about food, basically. One thing that's just, I love thinking about is that treatment originates outside of the body, and healing originates from inside. And that's what's so wonderful with EFTs, because while it is a treatment process, you're accessing the inside healing ability. And that's why I think EFT has the power to change all of the weight loss issues compared to any other treatment that's been out there, outside treatments. Remember that your clients, when I do sort of beginning interviews, your clients will give you all the information you need. Okay? Don't make assumptions that everybody's the same. I ask them questions, and they will give you everything you need to tap on, every feeling that is their issue, and you'll be able, it'll unfold very nicely for you when you ask them questions and just work with them for a few weeks. On the first page, the intake questions, these are important. You don't want to be rigid about making sure you cover them all, but it's really important just the collecting data. So question 1, how long have you been overeating? And you know, with any symptom, that's important. When did it start? Was it a singular event? Was it a time period? You know, someone saying, I started overeating at age 12 when I went to camp, or someone saying, no, it was this one thing happened when I was in 2nd grade. So you want to know that. Who else in your family is overweight or severely underweight? People are always looking for the exact identification of a family member that's overweight. Watch for who's underweight, who was starving in their family, who had a food issue, who picked on them about their own food, who's commenting, who's involved in weight in their family. What happened the last time you reached your goal weight? This is very, very important. I was working with someone before I was doing much tapping. I was working with someone with hypnosis, and I asked her, well, what happened? She had been to Weight Watchers and been successful a couple of times and then relapsed or fallen back, gained the weight again. I said, well, what happened the last time you reached your goal weight? And she said, no. I said, what happened? She said, this just can't be connected. What happened? And she said, she came home and announced to her family that she had reached her goal weight, and within 2 days her father died. And she has it forever connected in her mind. The association is there. From my class I did in New York, I asked that question, and 2 people burst out laughing and said, oh my God, the last time I was at my goal weight, I got pregnant. Now, they did not think they would get pregnant again. They weren't logically worried that they would get pregnant again. Their children were 17, 18, and 19. But emotionally, that was what was connected, and they were shocked. They said, how could that possibly be connected? Well, it was connected. Then the key, what emotions are you trying to tranquilize or avoid with food by being stuffed? In other words, you're not feeding your body anymore when you're eating more than you physically need or more than you need. And it's the analogy, you'd never fill your gas tank to the top and then fill your back seat and fill your trunk. It just doesn't make any sense. But that's what we do with the food. So the question is, what are you feeding? And that's very important to get to. Now, the obsessions, as I said, most people will say, yes, I think about food all day long. When I'm eating lunch, I think about what I'm having for dinner. When I'm having dinner, I'm thinking about what I'm going to cook tomorrow night. And they can't get it out of their head. So even if you help someone with obsessions about food, you've come a long way, and they'll feel greatly relieved just to feel more normal about their thoughts. Because people who are obsessing or having compulsive behavior, they feel out of control. And if you can help with the obsessions, the obsessions are threatening to them. And they can't control them. That's like unbidden thoughts in any obsession, so any OCD behavior, obsessive compulsive behavior. How would you spend your time if you didn't eat compulsively or if you didn't obsess about food anymore? And that's an interesting question, because they'll say, I never thought about that. Well, if they added up the hours and the minutes that they were truly focused on food, focused on alcohol, is there enough beer? Is there going to be enough there? Is the house stocked? People are very anxious about supply. If they weren't doing that, where would they be? And some of them, they would be anxious about their marriage that's falling apart. Some of them would say, the deeper childhood issues, and other people would say, I'm afraid of success, and I don't want to take my business where I believe it can go. So again, there are many directions that it can go. Now, the most important, I think, the two questions, and Alan was touching on these. What is the downside of losing weight? And what is the upside of remaining overweight?
Hold that thought. There's a kind of a pop going on. Why don't you try this just for a second? Just test it a little bit.
So as I said, the questions were...
Can you hear okay back there?
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
There's less of a pop. So why don't we just try that for
Okay.
a while? If that's a problem, then we'll do elsewhere.
So what is the downside of losing weight, and what is the upside of remaining overweight? And some people will say, oh, Carol, that's so obvious. Or quit smoking. That's so obvious. Don't you know what's wrong with smoking? And yes, I know what's wrong with smoking. So do you. What is the upside of quitting or losing or changing? And they'll tell you strange insights come out, but that's what you want. You want to hear what they have to say about what would happen if I reached my goal weight? What would happen if I quit smoking? I had a client who said she was a student, a graduate student at NYU, and she said, I wouldn't know what to do with my hands. And I laughed and thought that's not a big deal. For her, that was everything. Socially awkward, afraid, didn't feel close to her peer group, and she didn't know what to do. So when she got over that with tapping, it changed her belief system. Yes, I can do it. I can live without smoking. The upside of remaining overweight, people will say, well, I won't have any excuses anymore. Or that would be the downside. If I stay overweight, people will leave me alone. I won't have any excuses anymore. Whatever, you'll get all sorts of responses to that, which is very important. Now, when I have this list of questions, I make sure I cover them in the first session or two and just get the data. But be careful not to be too rigid. When I worked at Freedom Institute, which was an outpatient facility for addictions in New York, we had an intake form that was about 10 pages. And, beginning counselors, myself included, we'd go through every single question, not pay any attention to the client, right? It was trying to get the data for our boss, and it was ridiculous. There was no engagement with the client, and that's what you want. You need to engage with the client. So forget about the data. Get the data, but you will. Kind of trust that you will. Otherwise, you can end up being just missing the person and what's going on. Look for and treat the following emotional themes. Now, the list on the bottom of page 1, just look at those and circle ones for yourself that really trigger a response now, and then you can tap on those later or tap on them as we go through this class. Deprivation. Deprivation seems to be a big one for the food. Now, when I do quit smoking, loss comes out more often. Now, some of you may have it absolutely reversed. Have an experience that's different. But with deprivation, that seems to ring many, many bells for people. And they say, oh, so I have them tap even though I feel deprived. And I'm insatiable. That's the other thing. People will tell you, I feel insatiable, and I am insatiable. They cannot fill the hole, the emptiness, the loneliness, and that's what makes them feel nuts. They feel bizarre. How can I keep eating when I'm physically at my limit? What am I doing? And that's the thing when people say, well, Carol, you don't have this history, so how can you help people? Well, no, I don't have that history, but I can certainly identify with people being ashamed of themselves. I've certainly been lonely. I've certainly felt empty, abandonment, every single feeling, guilty, anxiety. I can identify with all the feelings, even though it hasn't manifested in excess and overweight. Okay, how about just the whole class? I just want to hear, just have you all do the deprivation, just so you know what it feels like. So I'll just do the, even though I feel deeply deprived and I feel insatiable, I deeply and completely accept myself. Even though I feel deeply deprived and feel insatiable, I deeply and completely accept myself. Even though I feel deeply deprived, insatiable, I deeply and completely accept myself. Even though I feel deeply deprived and insatiable, I deeply and completely accept myself. Now and then we'll go here. I feel deprived inside. I feel deeply deprived. I feel deprived inside. I feel deeply deprived. I feel deeply deprived. Deeply deprived. And deeply deprived. Now, sometimes just doing that in the beginning, I do that in the beginning of my classes, sometimes people will say, how did you know that that's the key? Well, I didn't know, but they just have them do that, have your classes, those of you who are starting to do classes, and see what pops up. And it surprises people. Even sometimes if that word or that emotion doesn't hit when I'm talking about it, once they do the tapping, like Gary says, even if it's not your issue, keep tapping and something will pop up. People will say, whoa, I didn't expect that, and something will come up. The primary psychological reversals, we'll get back to these as we are doing demonstrations and having you all see what pops out. What seems to, again, come front and center is safety. I don't feel safe to lose the weight. It's not safe for me to lose the weight. It's not safe for other people if I lose the weight. Family issues here are very important, or peers. People will say, well, my 4 friends and I go out to lunch every Friday. We're all a little bit overweight. And if I started going on a diet or working this program and started to lose, they'd be irritated with me. Be surprised how many people get irritated or envious and try to sabotage them as they're making some progress. So that's, again, the upside and downside. What's the worst that could happen if you actually lost the weight? Well, I'd lose my peer group. I mean, that happens in sports performance. I work with golfers. When I said to a guy who was an excellent golfer, I said, what would happen if you got even better? He said, you don't know? I said, well, what would happen to you? And he said, the guys would tell me, my foursome would tell me that I'm completely over-serious, too competitive, and I'd have to leave their foursome and move on. And that was too threatening for him. Same with smoking. All the addictions, all the problems come into play there. The identity issues are very important. Who will I be without the weight? Who will I be if I'm not drinking 4 nights a week and the party girl and, the one at the loudest one and the exciting one? And who will I be if I'm not the cocaine player? And that's just very important to try to get to the bottom of also with your clients. What will happen if? How will I see myself? How will other people see me? And then when I'm talking about the limiting beliefs, we're going to do a demonstration up here about the limiting beliefs that block your success. And I always say to people, what is your theory? Again, kind of trying to keep myself out of it more and saying, well, what is your theory? Why are you overweight now? And they'll say, well, and also, why now are you coming to therapy? That's sort of a big therapist question that they always ask, why now? People have been alcoholic for 20 years, lost 3 jobs, 2 wives, had a car accident, but they come in on Thursday, March 15th. Why now? And it's very important to get that, what put them over the edge? Question is always, what brings you to treatment? And you get, again, tease out, you get a little more information. When I was at Freedom Institute and we had those questions on the form, one of my clients, you have to be careful how you ask it. The question was, what brings you to Freedom Institute? And one of my clients wrote, the Midtown bus. So make sure you're clear when you're asking the questions. So this list of limiting beliefs, go over them yourself and watch. Here's one. Even though I'm overweight because of my metabolism. No, you're not. overweight because of your metabolism. So let's say you're 40 pounds overweight, maybe metabolism accounts for a few pounds, but that's not what's going on. And that's a way for people to say it's out of my hands, it's not my problem, it's not my fault, even though I know I inherited this body type or inherited this body shape. Well, that's a belief that will keep you stuck in that body shape, even if medical tests or studies show that that's true. If that becomes your belief, then you will absolutely need to stay within that limit. Okay? Now I want to go to the first demonstration, and I'll have a couple people. I have both chips. I think chocolate gets a little overrated. No one does this for potato chips. Potato chips really affect people. I have Doritos, potato chips, a Snickers bar, and chocolate M&Ms. And I'd like a few people to come up here who are really 8, 9, or 10. Really, if I showed them, and I know it's after lunch and everybody's had dessert, but if you opened the bag and smelled them, what would happen? Would you have a craving and actually want to eat it? Okay, so just a few people up here. Give you some grease, see? I mean, I could eat a stick of butter with salt on it for lunch and be very happy, so it's your Lay's. And then for dessert, I'd have whipped cream with sugar on it, so. And what would you like? Snickers? See, she was a Snickers person. And the anybody truly at a very high level for the M&Ms or Doritos?
That'd work too.
That would work too. Okay. Which? Either one? What would be your true 10? M&Ms. Okay. All right. Now this is where, again, clinicians, they'll start this way, and it's very exciting in a class to see the craving go away, but then they don't go further. And that's what's been so fun, is to watch what happens after the craving's reduced, what comes up. And I think people they too quickly move on to see this is how you help someone with weight loss, take the craving away. Well, if you take a chocolate craving away, they're not going to lose much weight. It's just not going to happen, and even if you redo the craving every time. So you need to get to the bottom. So would you like to open that?
Yes, I would.
Yes, she would. She's very eager to open it.
Dessert.
So don't eat one yet, but smell it and how.
I just did. That's nice.
Okay, just did. So right now, what is how high is the number? The suds, all the way. She's a 10. You can open that, or just even with the.
I'll smell it.
She wants to smell it.
In private, it would be a 20.
She doesn't want to admit it's a 20.
Actually, I could eat M&Ms all day long, so I could always say 9 or 10.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. Put them all. Well, hey, if that belief works for you, they aren't. Okay. Put those.
Taking them away now?
Yes. See. Oh, that's a good one. Did you hear that? You're taking them away now. I often do that with people where after they've had some progress with the cravings or whatever, I pose this question. Okay, what would happen if I told you couldn't eat dinner tonight? And the anger and the feelings that happen, obviously I can't control someone eating dinner, but you get the spike again that then you go tap on. How dare you try to control my food? Well, it was just a suggestion. So that's, okay, so, yes, okay, so tap. Okay? Even though I have this strong craving, everybody, use your own craving, I deeply and completely accept myself. Even though I have this strong craving, and you can add the food group if you want to, I deeply and completely accept myself. Even though I really want to eat this food right now, I deeply and completely accept myself. This terrible craving, this strong craving, this need to put it in my mouth, the strong craving, a strong craving, my strong craving. And I always end with the top of the head. It's my favorite spot. So it's this strong craving, right where my comb is. Okay? Now take a deep breath. I always have them do water, drink some water. And we're just looking for any change. Sometimes people get too hung up on, oh my God, did it go down 5 points? I'm looking for any change. Oh, why don't you take the bag again?
Can I smell them?
You can smell them.
Okay, yeah, I am down to about a 6.
Down to about a 6. And it may have been the nerves from being up here, but you actually looked a little shaky when you were opening that bag.
Yeah, I wanted to eat it.
Okay, that's what'll happen. People will get shaky around their substance. So watch someone at cocktail hour who's trying to control their drinking and they don't drink until after 5. watch the nerves that start to come up. So she's down to a 6. Did you smell?
Yeah. I'm surprised it smells too sweet.
Smells too sweet. So then there's a change. You don't have to get the number. I often forget to do the suds level. If you gave it a number,
A 4.
a 4. Now, for someone who's, quote, addicted to chocolate or would kill for chocolate, to say it smells too sweet is absurd. Okay, that makes no sense. Nothing is too sweet for her. How are you doing with the M&M?
I'd probably be a 4 or 5. I probably would not hide it too often when I was hiding it in the closet and not telling my husband that I had them.
And right now, right now you're a 4 or a 5?
4 or 5, yeah.
And also check kind of that desperation level, okay? Now put them all back on the chair again. We're going to do another one, okay?
These are sort of rancid, but it doesn't mean I wouldn't eat them.
Did you hear that? These are sort of rancid, but it doesn't mean I wouldn't eat them. Now, did they smell rancid when you first opened them?
No.
They're not rancid, okay? They're not rancid. She's having an effect. She's having an effect from the tapping, okay? So we'll go to the next round, and sometimes now here's where I mix the deprivation and the craving, okay? Even though I still have this craving because I feel deprived, I deeply and profoundly accept myself anyway. Even though I still feel this craving because I feel deprived, I deeply and completely love and accept myself anyway. Once more, even though I feel deprived and crave my favorite food, I deeply and profoundly accept myself anyway. Okay? My deprivation makes me crave food. I still feel this craving for my food. I still feel deprived and want to eat my favorite food. I still have some of this craving left. I still feel this craving. This remaining craving. Remaining cravings. Remaining deprivation. Remaining cravings. And remaining deprivation. Okay, smell your drug of choice. One thing I want to say that's not fair about people with food issues, for an alcoholic, they can be abstinent. For a cocaine addict, they get off the cocaine, okay? Someone with a food issue has to eat 3 meals a day. That's their addiction. It's not fair. You could never say to a coke addict, just do lines twice a day and see if it doesn't trigger the compulsion, because that's what does trigger the compulsion. So food actually reverses you and triggers you back in. How do they smell now?
Not very good,
They don't smell very good.
but they're here, and I would eat them.
Okay, just ongoing layers of it, but they don't smell very good. And a number,
1.
okay, she's down to a 1, and she said they don't smell very good, but they're here, so I still would eat them. So that's another layer where you need to tap for. I mean, I have lists of setups. They're what happened when you see food and what happens when you smell food. Well, advertising works. Right? So you're not thinking about food. All of a sudden, someone has a bag of potato chips. I mean, how many people say, oh, get that away from me because it's in front of you, and you don't stop. So she's at a 1, but still thinks she might eat them because they're in front of her. How's the Snickers?
I think it's higher.
Okay, she went up a bit. What number would you give it?
Maybe a 7.
She went up to a 7. Now, what happened with the word deprivation when we were, okay, what happened?
That's it.
That's it. Okay, so the deprivation is much more important than the food. The food is just the first door. You know, like Get Smart, the 10 doors, you know, this is the first door to get through. Deprivation is it. Okay, so we'll do another round on deprivation.
They still smell good, but I wouldn't eat it.
Okay, big difference. Okay, still smell good, wouldn't eat it. Okay, you still might eat it?
Sure, it's here.
Sure, it's here. Okay? Okay. Let's do one more for everybody on the deprivation, okay? And actually, if your word is more loneliness or emptiness, do that in the crowd. Even though I feel deprived and try to fill that with food, I deeply and profoundly accept myself anyway. Even though I feel deprived and want to fill it with food, I deeply and completely accept myself anyway. Even though I feel deeply deprived and fill it with food, I deeply and completely accept myself. I feel deprived. I've always felt deprived. I feel deprived. I'm scared of my deprivation. I feel deprived. I feel deprived deep inside. I feel deprived. I feel deprived. Okay, let me just check in with you. What's your name? Kathy.
It's gone down some.
It's gone down some, but the deprivation is the key. Now, that's what you want to do. You can either go to the craving, like when I do quit smoking and chewing tobacco, I'll start with the substance itself, but sometimes you want to just branch off, and now let's go straight down the deprivation, straight down the loss. My questions in here are all about what loss does it bring up? What else are you thinking of when it happens? So we'd probably do another deprivation for you. We're at a 7. What did it go down to? Just a 6. Sweeter, more appealing sweeter. No. It's starting, okay, it's going back up to too sweet. Okay? But deprivation is it. How many people felt a little bit sad when they were doing the tapping on the deprivation? Okay? That's the other thing that'll happen. Surprising, what?
When you first started, I didn't want the M&Ms, and I had been tapping for that. But as soon as I thought M&Ms, I salivated, and the desire to grab it didn't come. While you were doing the deprivation, I was doing abandonment. I've got abandonment
Yes,
issues.
okay.
And I felt the emotion, but when we just finished, I was still but the salivation had gone down considerably.
Okay. But if you saw how many people raised their hand, you know, out of watching, you're not in it, here's a demonstration, they're doing M&Ms, you're tapping on it, and all of a sudden you're starting to feel sad, and it can connect. Sometimes you're not sure what it's connected to. Surprising memories come up. When we had done, I think it's my next write-up that's ready to come out, a woman was doing tapping for visualization, whether she could see herself at her goal weight, and she ended up in the middle of it saying, I just had the strangest memory of someone scolding me for eating too much. Not a huge, enormous, repressed memory, but something that popped up when she was a child. And those things get lodged in us and need to come out, and they will come out with time. This is why you need to work with weight loss people for weeks. Like, work with them on an ongoing basis. Okay. How are you doing?
I'm fine. I don't even need to pick them up. They're
She doesn't need to pick them up.
But I feel really bad because I opened that bag and I'm wasting them.
Okay. Huge. My mother's favorite expression, I hate waste. So,
All those children in China.
okay. So now we have guilt. Now here's what to do. You can start with the guilt about that issue, and it will trigger all sorts of other guilts. Okay?
I was looking forward to bringing the M&Ms back to the table to eat, but I don't need them now.
Okay, doesn't need them now. Okay, so it just changes. Let's do one more on deprivation, and again, if your word is abandonment or loneliness or emptiness, just do that. And if not, think of your clients. Think of someone and do a surrogate tapping for one of your clients, and you might get an insight for one of them. Okay? Even though I still feel deprived, and I still feel hungry for something, I deeply and profoundly accept myself. Even though I still feel hungry for something and feel deprived, I deeply and completely accept myself. Even though I still feel hungry and empty and deprived, I deeply and completely accept myself. I feel hungry, empty, and deprived. Again, I feel hungry, empty, and deprived. Then I sometimes do alternative, the way Pat Garrington, I think, taught me. I feel full and satisfied. Then you alternate. I feel hungry and deprived. I feel full and satisfied. I feel hungry and deprived. I feel full and satisfied. I feel hungry and deprived. And that just triggers, again, other memories, other words, other images that you might have. And so sometimes, you know, whatever gets you to the core issues, okay? How are you doing in general with the guilt, just the feelings connected?
I'm good, yeah.
Actually, better.
Do you know what it was that was maybe hit or soothed? Or
Hope.
about what?
Success.
Okay. If you can get a weight loss client to this much hope, remember they've tried 430 diets, they've done the they've done everything, or else they wouldn't be with you, okay? If you can get to them to real hope, you've got something, okay? But then you need to reinforce it and keep working on it because, again, the food will trigger you. You have to eat 3 times a day. It's your substance. It's just not fair. So it will trigger you back into it, but you feel some hope. And how are you doing?
I would just ignore it now.
You would ignore the M&Ms? This is, what did you say in the beginning? I could eat M&Ms all day long?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I hide M&Ms. I buy them. That's the only thing I buy from the grocery store for myself.
Okay, closet hider. Okay. That's the other thing that'll happen. Again, the shame is very important. Eventually do a couple of rounds on shame for people. I feel ashamed of my weight. I feel ashamed of hiding food. That's what happens. An alcoholic has got, depending on what stage, again, there's a continuum, but certain alcoholics are hiding drinks and bottles of liquor everywhere. Desks at work, but they function pretty highly, but they're still hiding it.
Insatiable was the word that really struck me, not deprived
Okay.
so much, but insatiable.
Exactly.
Insatiable, and that's the driving. When you think of an addict, remember, like a crack addict, coke addict, will knock over their grandmother, steal the money. It doesn't matter. It's the priority thing again. They have to get their substance to numb them. There's a buzz. There's a utterly insatiable, I can't fill it. And that's the buzz that you start to watch and hear happen. And so if insatiable is the word, then you want to get to that. Okay, now, would any of you like to go further with those words and those emotions, or else we could all go and continue? Okay. You okay? You go further. Okay, Kathy was going to go a little further. Yes. Now, how about if we do start with insatiable, unless there's something else for you that you're saying, oh, this is triggering this memory, this feeling, this something else.
Insatiable is a new word for me, but enough was never enough.
Okay, do that. Is that all right to start there?
That's insatiable.
Okay. Even though enough was never enough, all my life, I deeply and profoundly accept myself anyway.
I deeply and profoundly accept myself anyway.
Even though enough was never enough,
Even though enough was never enough
all my life, and still isn't,
and still isn't,
I deeply and completely accept myself.
completely accept myself.
Even though enough was never enough,
Even though enough was never enough
and never has been,
and never has been
and still isn't,
and still isn't,
I deeply and completely accept myself.
I deeply and completely accept myself.
Enough was never enough.
Enough was never enough.
Enough is never enough. I don't know when it's enough. Enough is never enough. Enough is never enough. Enough is never enough. Enough is never enough. Okay. Enough is never enough. Okay.
I think probably shame. Mm-hmm. Probably, boy, that's such a big word. Inadequate would be a really good word. Incapable.
That you feel incapable, inadequate, and ashamed of yourself for feeling those? Or ashamed?
Or just never ever making it. Never being successful. Always being embarrassed, being unsuccessful. And it started with weight as a child, and then it's just carried out.
If there were one word that was the key, is it more inadequate or the shame?
Probably inadequate.
Okay, inadequate is her word. Now, this is where the language is so important. I have people come to me for the weight or the smoking, and I'll say, rate the urge for me, please. And they say, it's not an urge, it's a craving. Okay, if that's your word, switch it to the craving, because you want the bullseye, and you want the client's bullseye, even if you think you've got it. Make sure they're adding their own language, okay? So, even though I feel, you said inadequate. Even though I feel inadequate to the core, and always have, I deeply and completely accept myself and my feeling of inadequacy.
I deeply and completely accept myself and my feeling of inadequacy.
Okay. Even though I feel inadequate to the core, I deeply and completely accept myself and my feeling of inadequacy. I forgive myself for feeling so inadequate, but I feel deeply inadequate, and I accept myself for that feeling. I feel deeply inadequate, and I always have. I feel inadequate about everything I do. I feel deeply inadequate and always have. I feel deeply inadequate and I 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 always have. Okay? Just again, I say, take a breath, take a little sip of water. What's happening?
I don't feel as sad.
You don't feel as sad? Something unlocked while we were doing the tapping. Do you feel as, now again, I always forget to rate the suds. Where does the inadequacy, the feeling, the deep feeling you said with everything, it started with weight as a child, how does that overall feel?
Probably a 7.
A 7? A 7? So pretty high. But did we start at a 10? Oh, we start, okay. She was the one who said privately I'd say 20 for the Snickers. Well, then privately for inadequacy. So down to a 7, but you feel less sad, okay? What direction would you take it now? Does the inadequacy go to a pinpoint about the weight or about something else?
Well, what came up for me earlier, and I think it might still be this, is as having to take responsibility for myself once I don't have all of this in the way.
Okay, big one, and that's on the pages. What would happen if you lose the weight? You have to take responsibility for yourself, and the excuse is gone if the weight has disappeared. Okay? So would it be a fear of taking responsibility or a reluctance or a resistance, or how would you?
It feels so lonely and vulnerable.
To take responsibility or to?
If I give this up, then I don't have the excuse anymore, and I get or have to go ahead and live my life with the success that I'm capable of.
Okay. Even though I don't want to live my life with the success I'm capable of. I deeply and completely accept myself. Even though I'm afraid to live my life with the success that I'm capable of. I deeply and completely accept myself. Even though I'm afraid to be lonely, if I lose this weight and become successful, I deeply and completely accept myself. Okay. I'm afraid to lose the weight and be responsible. I'm afraid to be lonely with my responsibility. I'm afraid I'll feel lonely if I lose my friend, my extra weight. I don't want to give up the excuse of my extra weight. I feel loss already. And I'm afraid to feel more loss. I'm afraid to feel more loss. I don't feel safe losing the weight. Okay. How you doing?
It's up there.
And is it the loss again or that loneliness?
When you said lonely? When you said lonely.
Okay. When I said the word lonely in the tapping on one of the spots, that's where she spiked. So then again, go that direction, do one more on lonely. How would you say the sentence succinctly so it really hits home? Is it about the success, or just I'm afraid to be lonely, or you just feel lonely anyway, or if you lose the weight? What really feels bullseye?
I think I've hidden from that sentence for a long time. I'm surprised it's lonely. I think it's lonely. What else did you ask me? I'm not sure if I need to add more.
Is it lonely now, or you're picturing losing the weight and being lonely, or it's just a pervasive feeling of being lonely? Okay, okay. Now, food helps the loneliness, people will tell you, because it's their friend, it doesn't let them down, it doesn't talk back. It's like, the chocolate cake can be very soothing. That's the other thing with any kind of addiction. People are looking to soothe themselves, and they search until they land, okay? Many people land on food and chocolate, okay? So why don't we just do a general, and everybody, even though I feel lonely inside, and I always have, I deeply and completely accept myself. Even though I feel lonely inside, and I always have, I deeply and completely accept myself. Even though I feel lonely inside, I deeply and completely accept myself. I feel lonely inside. 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 I feel lonely. I feel lonely and empty. I feel lonely and empty. Now, if you heard her, also the big sigh came out right about here, and that's what you want to watch for. You're just kind of tracking any kind of energy moving. So how are you doing right now with just the theme of loneliness and the feelings?
Well, I feel better. I had a picture. I know food's control. I know it's the one thing I could always control. But what I saw was the child thing of truly that loneliness. When there was chaos, when there was any emotion, food was always what took care of it. And I had to always do that in private. Because there was an eye on me all the time with food. And so, and it's that same way now. I have a lot of energy, so I work or I eat, because it's like one or the other. And so loneliness, I think I got a piece to that with the quietness.
That was uncovered through the tapping. Because that's where, again, you start with the chocolate, and they don't know that this is where it's leading. But there's the little ahas, the little... Now, are you okay if I take a question? You're right? Okay. Sorry, I know you've been there 5 minutes before a break.
Dr. Look, I'm curious to know, I'm a little bit confused about the psychological reversal issue.
Yes.
When we do a positive affirmation versus a negative affirmation. Can you please enlighten me on that?
When would I do a positive versus a negative?
Well, I'm just kind of confused on the whole issue because I think just the way I'm wired on Planet Andy is I go kind of like from point A to point B, and I see that as like going somewhere else or something, and I just don't quite understand how we can do a positive affirmation in the same field as doing what I guess I would say a negative affirmation or something along those lines.
Oh, when I was switching from the satisfied to the dissatisfied?
Yeah.
That alternative technique, I think it's Pat Carrington. Would you like to, why don't you, I think she could answer that better.
Beautiful, that'd be great.
She taught us.
Okay.
Also, I know that it works, I just don't
Yes.
understand it.
Okay.
Oh, all right. It's a matter of timing. Hold it. I'll hold it. It's a matter of timing, and you get an instinct for when you feel that the person is at a point where a positive alternate tapping affirmation would begin to take. If there is very, very heavy emotion and it's very heavily negative, to put in a positive right away is to lose the contact, to not be where the client is, where the person is at. But if you, and I noticed that Carol did that as a couple of the people were really beginning to move. They were beginning to feel better, and one wasn't yet. But she waited to put in the positive until that happened. And I myself get a feeling that there is a point, at a turning point. You can't really pin it down to any criteria, but it's a turning point in the therapy where the person is ready for a positive. But you test it out. Watch their face. Watch their voice. See what happens.
Okay, I can understand that. Don't go anywhere yet, Pat. I understand that, and I don't have any issue with that. Hi, over here. I can understand that. I understand that. In the BSET free fast, I believe that there is a tapping point on the left temporal versus the right temporal for a positive versus a negative affirmation. Am I incorrect about that?
That's from Donna Eden's book. And then it's another energy technique where you state affirmatively into the right brain side, on the temporal side, what you want, and you state on the left brain side what you no longer want with the use of negative words. But that's it's a little different than what I think you were originally asking.
Well, are we finding that in basic practice that it really doesn't matter, it's just more the timing issue that Dr. Carrington's talking about?
No, I don't think so. No.
I find the timing is important, but I think I'm responding to something else. It's an indefinable thing. It's intuitive.
Yes, it is intuitive. If you notice, I'm a little in a trance up here. I'm not sure where it's coming from, I don't know why I decided to do that right at that moment.
Okay,
but I think
the place where you're tapping really doesn't matter.
The spot.
Yeah, the spots where you're tapping.
No, it's just the alternative technique. Every other spot you switch. I would say it's the theme of integration.
Yes.
Okay. When in doubt, you want to integrate into the person everything that's there. That includes, people who are saying, "Oh no, not me. I've never been angry." Yes, you have. Everyone has been. You need to embrace. It's the same thing as the basic setup. I deeply accept myself, even though I'm enraged, or even though.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Good. One more comment, and then we'll take.
That I have a question.
Yes.
So what you're saying is that in that moment, the positive is really an install. You're installing, and that's why you don't do it until there's been some clearing. Or are you also clearing with the positive?
I think both. I think you're also clearing.
Are people ever triggered by positives?
Yes.
In the same way that they can be by the...
Yes, very much so. Because when you think about it, what you're doing is the word will bring up any charge. So if you're saying, "Oh, I feel so satisfied," and you don't, keep tapping, that's all right. You don't have to say, "I don't feel satisfied." The word satisfaction will bring up, or I think that's the word I used with you, the word satisfaction will bring up, "Oh, don't be silly," the tail ender, and then you end up tapping as the tail ender is present. But you've recalled it, you've summoned it by that.
Yes, you have, and the juxtaposition of the two is awfully important, that the positive and the negative is there, and then the positive is there. That does something in terms of giving a perspective. It's very hard to describe. It's not quite installation. It is, but a straight installation, the positive, you'd go all through with the positive. You might not take, and then you'd go back to the negative, but you'd go all through if you were doing just positive. With this, you are allowing an ambiguity, you're allowing a conflict to exist. You're almost saying, "I accept myself with two different feelings at the same time," I think. I think that's very important.
Thank you. Thank you, Pat. Okay, we have a break for how many minutes?
For 15 minutes,
15 minutes.
back at 2:25.
Back at 2:25.
But here's Carol again.
And a number of you asked questions at the break, and I just thought I wanted to address them quickly before I go to the next section. One person asked me about the smoking and how I do it when someone calls me for smoking. And I just had a doctor. What's fun with smoking is somebody comes to you for quit smoking, it works, and it will work with this procedure. They send their neighbor, who sends his friend, the businessman, who sends his secretary, who sends their friend from Long Island, et cetera, et cetera. So I've just gotten this doctor from the same hometown where I've done quit smoking for 4 different people. One of them was my write-up that I think you all read about the chewing tobacco. So he called and said, "I want to do this quit smoking. I hear it's this new procedure. I've tried everything." And I said, "Well, here's how I set it up. I do an hour-and-a-half session, which is considered a double session, and we set up 3 of them. And you'll probably quit between the first and the second, but I want you to feel secure, so we always have that third. And you can cancel the last session. And in the first session, we do every craving possible, dry drag, and then we go to times of the day that are your problems. Then we go to the feelings and the losses underneath it. The protocols are very similar. The smoking's a little bit easier, again, because you don't have to smoke a couple of times a day, so you don't get re-triggered. So I usually set it up so it's 3 sessions, 3 weeks in a row of an hour and a half, or sometimes they say, I want to take 2 weeks. I've said to people, "Do you want to come back next week and continue?" And it's usually working, okay? And when it works, sometimes it starts to be threatening. And I will let them change their minds. I don't want to have anything to do with shoulds or no, you can do it or come on back. If they want to keep on smoking, let them. Let them. But now they know it works. They will come back, and they do call again in a couple of months when the timing is right. Over the telephone, when someone says, I again say, why now? They'll say, oh, my wife has really been bugging me. I said, no. That's not a good way to start. Is there any other reason for you? So that's just a quickie on smoking. We'll go to more of the smoking towards the end. Someone asked me about eating disorders. Do you treat them the same way? Yes, I do, meaning I treat all the feelings. Now, what's very different and very tricky is a bulimic, okay? Now, bulimics are obsessed about being fat, being the wrong body type, but what they do, the obsession becomes a binge, and they can eat the most unbelievable amounts of food in a short period of time, and then they absolutely are compelled to throw it up. Okay? So you have to get to different feelings, different urges, different feelings of desperation. I can't have this food inside of me. I'm scared of calories. I'm scared, whatever it is, and it'll be different. That a number of bulimics say what they're dying for, what they're looking for, is the buzz that they get after they throw up. Okay? So ask them again. And what are they trying to do? They're trying to numb any emotions. Now, what's a little trickier, again, with bulimia is there is a ritualistic something that's gotten going that I think even though people with eating have rituals and, leave me alone after dinner and I've got my box of donuts and that can be a ritual, but it's worse, I think, with bulimia. And they can do this cycle 10 times a day. And you can't believe they're still walking and that their heart is still working. But so you need to, again, tease out, ask them all the questions. What would happen if? What happens when you don't binge? What happens when you don't binge? How do you feel? What would happen if you binged and didn't vomit afterward, didn't purge? And the anxiety and the intensity that comes up. So then you're tapping on that. Not so that you want them to keep binging and keeping it down, but that's a start. If they binge, because the binges start to go down. They start to reduce that, okay? And then for anorexics, what are their fear? An anorexic, I haven't worked with any true anorexics, but what their feelings are, they'll come in and they'll say, well, I'm fat. There is a visual distortion, there's a hallucination going on. They actually see themselves as huge. Also fear of getting fat, fear of what that means, and all the control issues. And you have to go slowly. It's very, very serious. The disorder is, I guess it's also an eating disorder to be overweight, but the other two, I think, are more complicated. So go slowly, but just ask the questions, get the data, what would happen if. One of my bulimics, it worked with her, so she started to stop doing it. She didn't want to give up the buzz of her binging. It was her pleasure. She's feeling very deprived, and she's like, yeah, I know the tapping works, so I don't want to go do it. But I said, one of the questions that I asked was, what would happen if you weren't doing it? What would happen if you lost the weight? Because bulimics often look quite normal body type, but they also are often overweight. And she said, if I lose the weight, I will betray my fat self. I had no idea that was going to come out, okay? So we had to do the betrayal, disloyalty. Her mother's been overweight all her life. My mother will be mad at me, okay? Let me just go on page 3. I just want to go through some of these, which we have the seafood. Oh, then we go to ask the client to identify the problem times of the day. So you've done the craving and gotten to feelings underneath it. Then what is their key time? And here I say afternoon, when I'm alone, eating late at night. With smoking, it's always in the car, with my first cup of coffee in the morning, after dinner, because you want them to visualize, to get into the future. This is split. I try to split it into, the past that affects it, the present that affects you, and the future. In the future, if they stop smoking and they don't feel a need for a cigarette in your office after they were at a 10, they're now at a 0, that's great. But what are they going to do when they smoke, chain smoke on the telephone? If you don't get them in their mind visually to get to when they're on the phone or in the car when the kids are screaming or after dinner, my favorite cigarette or my favorite whatever, you need to get them in that head. So you want to say, what are your vulnerable times of the day? And then you want to go ahead and treat them. Yes?
Do you ever allow them something to have instead, like gum or?
It's sure, but that's an interim step, because if you're replacing the cigarettes with the gum, you have not addressed the driver. Right, the core issue, which is that you need to put something in your mouth to stop feeling. Now, when I did this, when I worked with a man who was addicted to chewing tobacco, he sent his close friend who was addicted to chewing gum, what is it called, the smoking gum. Nicorette, he said, well, what is the difference? He said, I might as well go back to my chewing tobacco because I'm paying a lot of money for packs of Nicorette. So it didn't help. So he knew there was something else going on. Here's an important driver for him. He said, it's my last rebellion. So he's been married, he has 3 children, he's working the, Wall Street job on the train, going to the suburbs every night, same old thing. He said, this is it, don't take, he didn't want it to be taken away. Okay. One of the things that can happen that, again, complicates feelings that just drive and make people anxious. Number 8 on page 3, how do you feel about yourself being overweight? And get to these for people. Even I'm ashamed of myself. Everyone looks at me because I'm fat. That's a big one. People they've been bothered by usually somebody in their family anyway. Somebody's picking at them. I have clients who go home for holidays and their mother comes up and pinches them and say, oh, how you doing? Just, it's a boundary. Get away. They say, people are picking at me. If I lose the weight, they'll comment. There's always someone in their family who comments whether they've gained 5, lost 5, gained 20, lost 20. And it becomes very irritating. And then there's a reverse thing that happens. They get into the rage and resentment and say, I'll show them. And they eat more. And it doesn't make logical sense, but nothing does. So there's a little bit of paranoia, and some of it's real. It's people bug them, talk to them about it. One client of mine was in a restaurant, and she said, she's very overweight, and she was saying, people are watching me, what I'm ordering and what I'm eating. And she got angry and said, so watch this, and she ate more. She was trying to kind of give it back to them in some way. Now that's backwards, right? But she was so irritated, and I said, well, do you think it's paranoid or do you think it's real? And she said, some of each. But she's kind of always looking over her shoulder. And where does that come from? That comes from her hating her body. She doesn't like how she looks. So she's walking down the street saying, oh, that person's looking at me saying, what am I doing eating? I'm overweight. You know the true definition of paranoia, right? You're not really paranoid unless you think the person in front of you is following you. A couple more of the pictures. Picture yourself with small portions on your dinner plate. How would you feel? People get panicky when their food's not around. That's the supply issue again. If you had small portions or if you felt hungry, I had this guy say to me, if I feel hungry, and I said, what's the big deal if you feel hungry? He said, I don't know. All I know is it makes me feel panicky. He was 10 pounds overweight, that's it. But he inhales his food to not feel whatever the hungriness, the emptiness reminds him of emotionally. Yes?
What do you do about the goal weight and how that is established and what sort of ideas a person has about that, and also what influences the culture has in determining the goal weight and also the belief systems about that?
Okay. Well, I find that the cultural piece disappears when the person is realistic and really working with their own feelings about it. They don't feel the shoulds as much, and you can tap on those. Let's go into the second. Let's go into the visualization about the goal weight. Just everybody in the room, and then I'm going to have a couple people come up afterwards. Close your eyes and go into your mind. What is the number that is meaningful to you? That is your goal weight, and I want you to picture yourself there at whatever the number is, and see how that works for you. Can you picture yourself? Is there a visual there? Can you hear yourself telling someone, this is sort of end result imagery, I've reached my goal weight of X, okay? Can you feel it in your body? Can you feel yourself at that goal weight, even if you have to make it up? Can you feel physically what your posture's like, what you feel like in your clothes, what it's like to walk down the street at the goal weight? Okay? And can you feel emotionally what it would feel like to you to be there? Just access any emotions that come up. So you're saying to someone in your mind, I've done it. They're saying, congratulations, I've reached my goal weight. How do you feel physically? How do you feel emotionally? Can you see it? Okay, now open your eyes. I'm going to have a couple people up here who really couldn't get very high on that. 10 would be, I can totally picture myself on the goal weight. Sometimes what happens with the goal weight is that a number has been there for 10 years, 20 years, and there is such a hang-up about whatever the person has, that they can't go there, and you need to either tap on it or go up 1 pound or down 1 pound. Sounds absurd, but make your goal weight. If your goal weight was 160 and it's been that for 20 years and you haven't gotten there in 25 years, make it 159 or 161 and see if it can shift emotionally. Hold on, he's got a follow-up. Does that make sense?
It does, but what about a goal weight of 74 pounds that I know an anorexia girl
Right.
has, you know,
Right.
and a tough one to get her to change her goal weight.
Yes. I would, working with an anorexia, I would not have them be doing the goal weight. I'd be working so long on the fear of getting fat, the body image, even though I hate myself for being too fat, even though they weigh 74 pounds, and that will start to shift. The goal weight, I do more with people who are starting overweight. Does that make sense?
Well, yes, because I'm thinking about her conversation, and because she saw herself actually as overweight
You're right.
at 78 pounds. If she could only get to 74 again, she'd be healthy. So you'd go with the other end of it of being
Well,
overweight.
I would say, well, how do you feel about being overweight at 78 pounds? Okay, that's right into her language, her version. I hate myself for being fat. 78. 78 is so gross. Okay, even though I hate myself for being 78 pounds. So you're starting to unlock the distortion there. So she can hate herself less, then 74 doesn't become this powerful, gotta get there. So the distortions will start to shift. Okay. Yes?
I had an amazing battle in my mind between 125 and 130. Now, what is the difference?
Mm-hmm.
You know, my logical
5
mind
pounds.
then would come in and say, 5 lousy pounds.
Yeah.
Get to
Right.
either one and you'll
Right.
be happy.
Right, right. Well, a conflict like that is a way to not get moving.
Yeah.
Right? So then you can tap on my ambivalence, tap on my delay, my avoidance, or just say, okay, I weigh 125, I weigh 125. How do you feel? I weigh 125, I weigh 125. Kind of see what pops up. Because some people do have very unrealistic goals, and that's the cultural piece. But when you're tapping on the feelings, you get out of this cultural social crap, basically. When you're really tapping on your feelings and your the self-esteem issues and the being ashamed and feeling worthy, you're not going for the magazine thin anymore. That starts to shift because the insecurity goes away. That's another thing. Insecurity, big word for the food makes people feel secure. So that's just another one if it triggers for you. Yes?
Carol, I just want to thank you for some of your first protocols because I use them
Thank you.
doing positive changes. One of the things that I've helped and that we've learned to tap on is taking their goal weight and making it their normal weight.
Yes, that's part of...
Because if they tap that down, because
Yes.
unconsciously everybody wants to be normal, whatever they consider normal to be, so their
Yes.
unconscious moves in that direction.
Thank you. And you need to tap because someone will say my normal weight is let's say the person 125, 130, and if they don't believe it, it doesn't matter. So you have to tap for it until they feel like, oh yes, I could get there. Here is Donna Eden's temporal tap version. I'm just going to do half of it. I don't like the left half that she does. You take in totally positive language, my normal weight, my goal weight is, and you tap here, say my normal weight is, and I can weigh that now. That's actually Gary's phrasing he uses as well with affirmations. But you say, I can easily reach my goal weight, you can say, I can easily reach my goal weight of 125. And what you're doing, and this is part of the hypnosis, right? You are bypassing the critical faculty of the left brain. So you're getting in here to the right brain. If there's a conflict, right brain always wins. So if the right brain thinks, this is my only protection to have 40 extra pounds, the right brain will win. It doesn't matter that you want to look thinner, that you want to be thinner, you want to be healthier.